I'm Jennifer Wilson, now 32 years old, and the driving force behind Webfer Solutions, a company currently valued at $8 million. I built this enterprise from scratch, dedicating 80-hour weeks to its growth, primarily motivated by a deep desire to provide for my family, who had always faced financial hardship throughout my childhood. Then, during dinner one Sunday, my father, Richard, looked directly at me and declared, "We've decided to give your sister your shares. She's more in need of them than you are." My mother quietly agreed, while my father added with a smirk, "You possess the ability to earn money readily." "She does not." My only response was a simple inquiry, "Is that truly the case?" That very evening, I withdrew every penny of my personal investment from the company. But that was merely the prelude. Before I recount the rest of this incredible sequence of events, please let me know where you're tuning in from and consider subscribing if you wish to hear more narratives about asserting your boundaries. Growing up in the small town of Millfield, Ohio, our family unit never knew abundance. My parents, Richard and Margaret Wilson, navigated life relying strictly on one paycheck to the next. My dad was employed at the local manufacturing plant, while my mom pieced together various part-time roles to ensure we managed. Our dwelling was a modest two-bedroom house in constant need of repairs that Dad simply couldn't afford to undertake. My sister, Charlotte, 3 years my junior, received an asthma diagnosis at a young age. While her health concerns weren't life-threatening, they were sufficient to establish her as the delicate one within our family structure. Charlotte's medical necessities frequently overshadowed everything else, including my own school activities or even basic personal requirements. By the age of 10, I had discerned the unstated roles within our family dynamic. Charlotte was the one requiring safeguarding and special attention, while I implicitly became the responsible, self-sufficient child expected not to create additional burdens. I never voiced discontent when my parents missed my school performances due to Charlotte's medical appointments, or when I wore secondhand clothing while Charlotte received new items, justified by her need for allergy-friendly materials. From an early age, I exhibited innate entrepreneurial inclinations. At 11, I operated the most successful lemonade stand in the neighborhood, meticulously documenting my earnings in a notebook. By 14, I was repairing computers for neighbors, charging $15 per service at a time when local repair shops asked $60. Mr. Peterson, who lived down the street, imparted the fundamentals to me after I expressed interest in his home office setup. He became the closest figure I had to a mentor during those formative adolescent years. "You possess a genuine talent for business, Jenny," he remarked to me one afternoon after I had successfully upgraded his wife's laptop. "Don't ever allow anyone to tell you otherwise." Throughout my high school years, I managed a multitude of part-time jobs, including shelving books at the library, working weekend shifts at the grocery store, and providing math tutoring to younger students. The majority of my earnings went directly into the family's shared fund. When Charlotte needed a new winter coat or Dad's truck required repairs, I quietly contributed my savings. It was never explicitly demanded, yet the expectation was as pervasive as the perpetual layer of dust in our attic. Upon receiving college acceptance notifications, I opted for State University despite being awarded a partial scholarship to Cornell. State was geographically closer to home and more economically feasible, enabling me to continue working and providing support for my family. I pursued a degree in business administration, particularly drawn to the entrepreneurship courses that illuminated potential pathways to creating something entirely new. It was during an introductory entrepreneurship class in my sophomore year that I encountered Ryan Davis. He possessed remarkable skills in software development, but readily admitted to having no understanding of business. We were assigned together for a semester-long project involving the creation of a theoretical business plan, and our complementary strengths resulted in a proposal for a digital marketing platform that earned us the highest grade in the class. "We could actually transform this into a real business, Ryan suggested as we celebrated over coffee. "It's not merely an academic exercise. The market is in need of precisely this kind of solution." My parents remained skeptical regarding my entrepreneurial aspirations. "A secure, steady job with employee benefits is what you truly require," Dad would insist whenever I mentioned startups or venturing into business. Mom would frequently add, "Not everyone achieves significant success, dear. Sometimes it's wiser to simply be practical." Concurrently, Charlotte withdrew from community college after a single semester, claiming it wasn't suited to her interests. She subsequently cycled through a series of retail positions, none lasting longer than a few months. Each instance of her quitting or being terminated prompted my parents to rationalize, explaining that she simply hadn't yet discovered her true calling or that the manager had unfairly targeted her from the outset. Following my graduation, I received a job offer from a marketing firm based in Chicago. The compensation was adequate to continue contributing to my family's finances while simultaneously establishing my own independent life. However, the entrepreneurial drive that Ryan had helped cultivate within me refused to subside. Our business-related discussions had transitioned from abstract concepts to tangible plans, with Ryan dedicating his free time to developing preliminary software. The evening prior to my scheduled acceptance of the corporate position, Ryan contacted me. "I've just resigned from my job," he declared. "I'm committing completely to our concept. Are you with me or not?" This presented the most challenging decision I had ever faced: security versus inherent risk, predictability versus boundless potential, accepting my preordained family role versus defining my own individual path. "I need some time to consider," I responded to Ryan, my mind already racing with conflicting possibilities and anxieties. That night, sleep evaded me almost entirely. By morning, I had reached my conclusion. I contacted the marketing firm and formally declined their offer. Then I called Ryan. "Let's do this," I confirmed. The initial period was incredibly demanding. Ryan and I subsisted on instant noodles and coffee, working from my cramped apartment with a single desk we shared. We dedicated ourselves to developing our platform through 18-hour workdays, refining the business strategy, and creating pitch materials for potential investors. Our very first bank loan application was summarily rejected. The loan officer scarcely reviewed our business plan before dismissing it, stating without even making eye contact, "You lack sufficient collateral and prior experience. Reapply once you've operated your business for a minimum of 2 years." Walking back towards my apartment that day, tears welled up, the first time I had cried since embarking on this endeavor. It wasn't solely the rejection. During the meeting, I had received a text from my mother requesting $300 for Charlotte's car insurance. It seemed the universe was determined to reinforce my established role, the responsible one, the provider, the safety net for others, while possessing none myself. Ryan found me seated on a park bench, clutching the rejection letter. Instead of offering empty words of comfort, he simply sat beside me in silence for several minutes. "We don't require their approval," he eventually stated. "We will discover another path." And somehow, against all logical odds, I believed him. We officially launched WebSphere Solutions from my apartment, utilizing equipment pieced together from our meager savings and credit cards. Our workspace comprised a wooden desk I had salvaged from the curb during college move-out, 2 folding chairs acquired from Walmart, and a whiteboard we had installed on the wall without seeking my landlord's permission. The initial 3 months were characterized by relentless rejection. I placed hundreds of cold calls to prospective clients, refining our pitch with each dismissal. Ryan worked tirelessly on the platform, implementing improvements based on feedback from the small handful of individuals willing to engage with us. We subsisted on a diet of inexpensive coffee and discounted groceries, stretching every dollar to its absolute limit. The pivotal breakthrough occurred unexpectedly. Timothy Westfield, the marketing director at Regional Healthcare Network, agreed to a meeting after my 7th follow-up call. "Your sheer persistence impressed me," he confessed when we finally met across a table in a downtown coffee shop, the only meeting space we could afford. We presented our prototype, demonstrating how our platform could streamline Regional's digital marketing efforts while providing sophisticated analytics their existing system lacked. Timothy posed challenging questions, but I could discern the spark of interest in his eyes. "You're somewhat unpolished," he remarked finally, "but you clearly have something promising here. Let's initiate a 3-month trial period." That evening, Ryan and I celebrated back at my apartment with a small indulgence, genuine delivery pizza, a luxury compared to our usual frozen variety. This minor victory felt monumental, like the initial crack in a dam that had been impeding our progress. Armed with Timothy's contract as tangible proof of concept, I made the difficult decision to approach my parents regarding potential investment. They possessed approximately $25,000 in retirement savings, not a vast sum, but sufficient to enable us to rent a small office space and acquire essential equipment. I wouldn't even ask if I didn't possess absolute conviction in this venture. I explained at their kitchen table, presenting our business plan and Timothy's signed agreement. I give you my word that I will make this worthwhile for you. Once we achieve profitability, you will receive your investment back, plus interest, and I will be in an even stronger position to assist the family further. My father ran his hands through his thinning hair, an expression of skepticism etched on his face. What becomes of this money, Jennifer, if your business fails? This is all we possess. It will not fail, I stated with a conviction I wasn't entirely certain I felt myself. I will not permit it to fail. After a week of deliberation and countless probing questions, they agreed to invest. I instructed my lawyer to prepare the appropriate legal documentation, designating them as minority shareholders with a combined 15% stake. In that moment, I was simply overwhelmed with gratitude for their trust, never anticipating how that decision would later become a source of significant distress. The subsequent 18 months were a relentless whirlwind of 80-hour workweeks. I developed severe insomnia, frequently spending days with only brief periods of sleep snatched between client meetings, sales calls, and necessary administrative tasks. My social life ceased to exist entirely. On my 31st birthday, Ryan had to remind me it was a special occasion. I had completely forgotten in the all-consuming haze of work. When we finally moved into our first dedicated small office space, a modest area situated above a deli in a less expensive part of town, I experienced a newfound sense of legitimacy. Possessing an actual business address as opposed to my apartment made WebSphere Solutions feel more tangibly real than it had before. Hiring our first employee represented another significant milestone, bringing with it a mixture of pride and apprehension. Amanda Thompson joined us as our client services coordinator, managing the expanding administrative workload as we acquired more customers. Signing her first paycheck was a sobering moment. The livelihood of another person now depended on our success. The regional healthcare contract generated valuable referrals, and we soon secured 3 additional major accounts in rapid succession: a local university, a regional bank, and a chain of fitness centers. Each new client brought both increased revenue and novel challenges as we scaled our operations to meet their diverse needs. During this period of significant growth, my sister Charlotte married Peter Sullivan, an aspiring musician who had not held a stable job in years. My parents expected me to finance a substantial portion of the wedding, despite the fact that WebSphere desperately needed every available dollar for essential expansion. Your sister will only experience this once, my mother insisted when I proposed a more understated celebration. And it's not as though you lack the necessary funds now. I ultimately wrote a check for $15,000, funds that should have been allocated towards hiring another developer. When Ryan questioned the expenditure, I offered vague excuses about familial obligations rather than admitting the uncomfortable truth. I simply didn't know how to refuse my family's requests. The moment we achieved $500,000 in annual revenue, I invited my parents out to dinner to commemorate the achievement. Their initial investment had been absolutely crucial, and I genuinely wanted to acknowledge that contribution. We always maintained our belief in you, my father declared that night, a statement that contradicted years of prior evidence. My mother added, "We are so incredibly proud of how you are taking care of the family. That is what holds the greatest importance." Their words should have resonated warmly within me, but something about their phrasing left me feeling cold. Was that truly the sole dimension of my accomplishment they perceived? My capability to provide for the family? When my parents' car subsequently broke down beyond repair a few months later, I didn't hesitate to purchase them a replacement. Nothing extravagant, but reliable and safe. Their previous vehicle had been a constant source of anxiety, and removing that worry felt like a tangible way to improve their daily lives. The business continued its upward trajectory, though not without encountering setbacks. A critical server crash resulted in a 3-day loss of productivity and nearly cost us the university account. I developed severe stress-induced migraines and ended up in the emergency room after collapsing during a key client presentation. "You cannot continue at this pace," Ryan told me during a visit to my hospital room. "The company requires you to be healthy." What he left unsaid, but which I clearly perceived in his expression, was his concern about the relentless pressure of my family obligations. He had witnessed the incessant phone calls, the emergency pleas for funds, the way I would instantly set aside everything whenever Charlotte or my parents expressed a need. Thomas Reed from Venture Capital Partners expressed keen interest in our company after observing our presentation at a regional business conference. His offer of initial round funding came with demanding conditions, but would supply the critical capital we urgently required for expansion. "Your current valuation is nearing $2 million, he informed us during the negotiation phase. "That is genuinely impressive for an organization of your age." $2 million. The figure seemed surreal. We had constructed something of significant value from nothing, and a part of me desired to celebrate this momentous milestone. Yet, another part recognized that increased value would inevitably lead to increased expectations from my family. As our team expanded to 10 employees, my role transitioned from executing tasks myself to managing personnel and processes. The learning curve proved steep. However, I discovered I possessed a natural aptitude for leadership. Our office space enlarged, eventually occupying the entire second floor above the deli, and we invested in proper furnishings and necessary technology. With success came further family expectations. Charlotte's husband, Peter, decided to launch a recording studio business and explicitly expected me to furnish the initial startup capital. My parents began discussing their impending retirement, subtly hinting that they might require supplementary support beyond their anticipated Social Security income. And throughout all of this, I continued to acquiesce, seemingly unable to break the deep-seated pattern established during my childhood. As WebSphere Solutions continued to flourish, we relocated to a more prestigious office building located downtown. The new space was 3 times the size of our previous location, featuring glass-walled conference rooms and a dedicated reception area. Walking through it for the first time, I felt a blend of profound pride and an unsettling sense of being an imposter. Was this genuinely the same company Ryan and I had initiated at my kitchen table? Our team grew to 25 employees, each desk representing an individual with rent to pay and potentially a family to support. The weight of that significant responsibility kept me awake many nights, but it also compelled me to work even harder, determined to ensure the company remained profitable and continued its growth trajectory. With the business valuation nearing the $5 million mark, I concluded it was time to relocate my parents from their deteriorating neighborhood. I found a comfortable 3-bedroom house situated in a safe area with highly rated schools nearby. This wasn't because Charlotte still resided at home, but because she and Peter frequently left their children with my parents when they required uninterrupted creative time or had musical engagements. "This is far too much, Jennifer," my mother commented when I showed them the house, though her eyes subtly betrayed her true feelings. She desired the house, but felt obligated to exhibit a token resistance. "You are deserving of this," I replied, "and I am now in a position to afford it." My father silently walked through the house, running his hand along the solid countertops and opening cabinets to inspect the quality. Finally, he turned to me. "Your sister could benefit from a new place as well, you know." The comment stung, but I had become accustomed to such moments, the instantaneous redirection from acknowledging my achievements to focusing on Charlotte's needs. "One matter at a time, Dad," was all I could manage to say. Around this period, Charlotte announced her second pregnancy and promptly quit her minimum wage job at a local craft store. The chemicals involved might potentially harm the baby, she explained when I inquired about her employment status during a family dinner. Furthermore, Peter is on the verge of securing a major record deal. We simply need to dedicate our focus to advancing his career at this time. My parents nodded in apparent agreement, as if this reasoning were perfectly logical, while I mentally calculated the extent of additional financial dependency the family would now place upon me. I had already been covering Charlotte's health insurance through WebSphere, listing her as a dependent, a practice my accountant had cautioned against. The dynamic grew increasingly uncomfortable. Charlotte began contacting me directly whenever she required funds for doctor's appointments or essential baby supplies, completely bypassing our parents. "You are my incredibly successful older sister," she would state with what sounded like practiced admiration. "I feel so fortunate to have you looking out for me." Within our local community, my parents proudly spoke of me to neighbors and friends. "Our Jennifer manages her own successful company," they would boast. However, in private conversations, their focus was exclusively on what more I could potentially do for the family, particularly for Charlotte. I once overheard my mother speaking on the phone to her sister, remarking, "Jennifer could certainly assist Charlotte with a down payment for a house if she chose to. It's not as though she lacks the financial means." The deep resentment I felt conflicted sharply with the sense of responsibility I had so thoroughly internalized. Wasn't this the very reason I had worked so relentlessly to provide for my family? But the undeniably one-sided nature of our relationship had reached a point where it could no longer be ignored. My accomplishments were seemingly valued primarily for their practical utility to others, rather than as achievements worthy of recognition in their own right. It was at a client event that I first met Michael Anderson, an architect whose firm had recently contracted with Webfair. He was intelligent, possessed a good sense of humor, and was refreshingly candid. When he suggested we have dinner, I surprised myself by accepting. Between building the company and managing family obligations, dating had been non-existent for years. "Tell me about yourself," Michael requested during our initial date. And I'm not referring to WebSphere. "I want to understand who Jennifer is." The question caught me completely off guard. Who was I, separate from my company and my designated role as the family's financial anchor? I struggled to formulate an answer, recognizing just how much of my identity had been consumed by my responsibilities to others. As our relationship developed, Michael observed the constant interruptions emanating from my family. The phone calls during dinner, the weekend plans canceled because Charlotte needed something, the subtle shift in my expression whenever my parents' number appeared on my phone. "They appear to rely on you quite heavily," he commented thoughtfully after I had abruptly ended our weekend getaway because my parents' air conditioning unit broke down. "They require my support," I responded automatically, repeating the familiar refrain. Michael carefully chose his subsequent words. "There exists a distinction between providing support for family and being exploited, Jennifer." No one had ever before suggested that my family dynamic might be unhealthy. His comment opened a door I had deliberately kept shut, a possibility I had refused to consider. Yet, I quickly closed it again. "You don't fully comprehend the situation," I insisted. "They made significant sacrifices for me during my upbringing." But Michael's observation lingered, rendering me more conscious of patterns I had previously accepted without question. With Webfair's continued success, I decided it was time to formalize the company's share structure more officially. My parents already held their 15% stake from their initial investment, which had appreciated significantly in value. I consulted with our corporate attorney about potentially allocating some shares to Charlotte as well, under the impression that this might provide her with passive income and potentially alleviate the direct financial requests. Meanwhile, Charlotte's demands escalated, becoming more specific and costly. Her children required private schooling because the public options were deemed inadequate. Their house needed extensive renovations because its condition was purportedly affecting the children's health. Peter's recording studio demanded upgraded equipment because the industry standard had evolved. Each request arrived accompanied by emotional manipulation, subtle reminders of childhood sacrifices, implications that refusing meant I lacked genuine affection for my family, and suggestions that my financial success inherently obligated me to cater to others' needs. The breaking point was reached when I overheard my mother on the telephone while visiting their home. "Jennifer simply fails to grasp how difficult things are for Charlotte," she was telling the person on the other end of the line. "She has always been rather self-centered with her financial resources. One would assume, given all her success, that she would contribute more." I stood frozen in the hallway, a generous basket of expensive groceries in my arms, Groceries I had brought because my mother had mentioned they were too costly on your father's pension. In that precise moment, something fundamental shifted within me. The narrative I had accepted my entire life, that I was inherently responsible for the welfare of everyone else, that my intrinsic worth was measured solely by what I provided, suddenly felt like an oppressive chain encircling my neck. When Peter's recording studio venture failed after less than a year, everyone implicitly expected me to absorb the resulting losses. A debt of $60,000 somehow magically became my responsibility, justified by the notion that family supports family. I reluctantly wrote the check, but felt nothing but profound resentment as I did so. WebSphere attained an $8 million valuation on our 5th anniversary. Ryan organized a modest celebration at the office, complete with champagne and a cake shaped like our company logo. We accomplished it, he stated, raising his glass. From your kitchen table to this moment. I am truly proud of us. That same week, I was awarded a regional business accolade recognizing female entrepreneurs. The ceremony was scheduled for a Thursday evening, and I invited my entire family to attend. Not a single one of them appeared. Charlotte cited a migraine, Peter claimed a musical engagement, and my parents needed to supervise the grandchildren. I sat alone at the table specifically reserved for my family, accepting congratulations from strangers while the empty chairs served as a poignant reminder of their absence. Michael attended in their stead, arriving late due to an emergency at his architectural firm, but managing to arrive just in time to witness me receiving the award. You unequivocally deserve to be celebrated, he whispered as I returned to the table, trophy in hand. The overt favoritism shown towards Charlotte had become so evident that even my employees began to notice. When my parents visited the office, they spent the majority of their time discussing Charlotte's children and offering justifications for her various occupational setbacks, barely acknowledging the thriving business I had dedicated my life to building. You need to establish some clear boundaries, Michael gently suggested after witnessing a particularly uncomfortable family dinner where my parents lauded Charlotte's newly acquired hobby of painting, which I had paid for, while asking almost nothing about the progress of the company. The concept of boundaries felt alien and, frankly, terrifying. What would become of our relationship if I ceased being the perpetual provider? Would any connection remain at all? After considerable introspection, I resolved to host a special family dinner to discuss the future trajectory of Webfair. Our attorney had recommended establishing trust funds or more sophisticated shareholding arrangements as the company continued its growth. I believed this might present an opportunity to formalize expectations and potentially cultivate healthier relationship patterns. In preparation, I consulted our lawyer regarding stock options and potential tax implications for family members. My intention was for everything to be transparent, legally sound, and properly documented moving forward. As the date of the dinner approached, I felt a growing sense of unease. Something about my parents' recent behavior suggested an underlying sense of entitlement that transcended typical family expectations. Charlotte had made several remarks concerning her anticipated share of the business, despite having contributed absolutely nothing to its creation or growth. But nothing could have prepared me for the actual events that unfolded during that dinner. I decided to host the dinner at my parents' house, the very home I had purchased for them, believing the familiar surroundings would facilitate a more comfortable conversation. I brought an expensive bottle of champagne to celebrate Webfair's ongoing success and acknowledge the family's tangential involvement in its journey. The evening commenced pleasantly enough. Charlotte and Peter arrived late, as was their custom, accompanied by their children, who immediately ran to the playroom my parents had furnished specifically for them. My mother had prepared my favorite meal from childhood, roast chicken with mashed potatoes and green beans, a gesture that touched me despite the underlying tension I had been experiencing. During the main course, I shared our company's most recent milestones, securing a major new client within the healthcare sector, announcing plans for expansion to the West Coast, and detailing a potential partnership with a complementary technology firm. Ryan and I had invested months of work into these developments, and I was genuinely enthusiastic about sharing the news with my family. That all sounds simply wonderful, dear, My mother commented, but her gaze kept shifting towards my father, an unspoken communication passing between them. After dessert, a store-bought cheesecake, despite my mother knowing I would have gladly brought one from the artisanal bakery near my office, my father cleared his throat in the manner he always did before making an announcement. "Jennifer, your mother and I have had a discussion," he began, his tone unusually formal. "Regarding the shares in your company." I nodded, assuming this was leading into precisely the conversation I had intended to initiate. "Yes, I did wish to discuss that this evening. In fact, I have been consulting with our attorney about. We've arrived at a decision," he interrupted, something he rarely did. "We have transferred your shares to your sister. She is in greater need of them than you are." The words initially seemed nonsensical. They hung suspended in the air like an abstract concept I was unable to fully grasp. "What do you mean you've given my shares?" "The 15% that you legally own." My mother reached across the table to pat my hand. "It is for the best, dear. Charlotte has her children to consider, and you are aware that Peter's career is still developing. But those specific shares belong to you," I countered, still attempting to comprehend the situation. "They were intended as part of your retirement plan." My father's expression hardened. "And we retain the right to decide what we do with them. We are transferring them to Charlotte." Charlotte visibly straightened in her chair, a self-satisfied smile playing at the corners of her mouth. There was no discernible trace of gratitude or humility, only the palpable sense of entitlement fulfilled. "You cannot simply transfer shares without proper legal documentation," I explained, my business acumen momentarily overriding my emotional shock. "There are established legal processes, tax implications involved." "Your lawyer has already taken care of it," my father interrupted again. "We contacted him last week." The sense of betrayal cut deeper. My own company attorney had facilitated this without my knowledge. That seemed utterly impossible unless they hadn't actually conferred with him at all. They were attempting a bluff, or worse, had fallen victim to some form of deception. "Which lawyer, precisely?" I inquired, keeping my voice remarkably steady despite the frantic pounding of my heart. "The company one," my father replied vaguely. "Thompson or Thomas or whatever his name is. Thomas Reed was our venture capitalist. Thompson was someone entirely unrelated." They were clearly fabricating the story. But the intention behind the falsehood was as profoundly hurtful as if they had actually succeeded in transferring the shares. "I understand completely," I stated quietly. My father must have misinterpreted my calm demeanor as acceptance, because he added with a dismissive gesture, "You possess the ability to generate additional income, Jennifer. That is your particular talent. Charlotte lacks that ability. She requires security for her future." The implication was unmistakably clear. My worth was solely defined by my capacity to produce income for others. Nothing more. Not my years of unwavering effort, not my significant personal sacrifices, not the decades of providing support for all of them, merely a resource to be tapped, a walking, talking ATM machine. Charlotte finally spoke, her voice dripping with what sounded like syrupy sweetness. "We are so profoundly grateful, Jenny. This will make such a significant difference for the children's college funds." College funds. The children were only 3 and 5 years old. If Charlotte were genuinely receiving shares valued at over $1 million based on the company's current valuation, there would be absolutely no necessity to contemplate college funds at this stage. The financial value would far exceed any potential educational expenses. Her statement unequivocally confirmed my suspicion. None of them genuinely comprehended the actual value or practical function of business shares. In that singular moment, I perceived my family with startling clarity, perhaps for the first time. The realization was simultaneously liberating and excruciatingly painful. Years of being utilized, of experiencing conditional love predicated upon what I could provide, of being valued solely for my utility. It all crystallized into one sharp, painful instant of absolute clarity. "Is that truly the case?" I reiterated, my voice strangely calm. Something in my tone must have alerted my father, as his expression subtly shifted. "Now, do not misconstrue this. We remain a family unit. We are simply attempting to balance things out between you girls." "Balancing things out?" As though my years of consistent financial support, the house they were sitting in, the car parked in their garage, the vacations I had funded, the medical expenses I had covered, as though all of that counted for nothing in their calculation of fairness. I comprehend perfectly, I stated, rising from my seat. If you will kindly excuse me, I must depart. I have an early engagement scheduled for tomorrow morning. But you have not even had coffee yet, my mother protested weakly. And I thought we might look at those photographs from Charlotte's painting class. Another time, I said, collecting my purse and the unopened bottle of champagne. Thank you immensely for the dinner. The drive back to my apartment passed in an emotional blur. I managed to pull into my driveway before the very first tear escaped. And then, it felt as though a dam had burst. I sobbed uncontrollably in my car, a deluge of grief I hadn't experienced since childhood. Great, heaving cries that left me gasping desperately for air. Years of suppressed hurt poured out all at once, not solely from that evening's blatant betrayal, but from an entire lifetime of being valued only for my capacity to give. Around midnight, I contacted Michael. Are you available to talk? I inquired when he answered, my voice still rough from crying. What has happened? He asked immediately, his concern evident even over the telephone connection. I recounted everything that had transpired, the dinner, the shares, my father's specific words. He listened attentively without interruption, offering support only after I had finished speaking. Jennifer, I am profoundly sorry, he said finally. But truthfully, I am not entirely surprised. This pattern has been consistent throughout the time I have known them. I know, I admitted softly. I simply was unable to perceive it clearly until tonight. What course of action do you intend to take? He asked, the simple question offering something my family had never provided: agency, choice, respect for my own decisions. I do not wish to merely endure the hurt, I stated, a new and firm resolve beginning to form within me. I intend to take action. After ending the call, I spent several hours meticulously analyzing every single financial connection between myself and my family. The mortgage on their house remained in my name. The vehicle was registered under my name. Their supplemental health insurance policy was provided through my company benefits, listed with me as the primary policyholder and them as dependents. Charlotte's children's private school tuition payments were automatically debited directly from my personal account on a quarterly basis. I was determined not to engage in any vindictive actions. That was not the person I aspired to be. But I absolutely needed to extricate myself from the parasitic relationship that had become so deeply entrenched. First, I accessed the company account where I maintained my personal investments, kept distinct from operational funds. I withdrew every single penny I had personally contributed beyond the essential working capital. These funds were resources I had initially earmarked for our planned West Coast expansion. The business could undoubtedly survive without immediate expansion, but I required these specific resources now to protect myself financially. Next, I emailed Ryan. Despite the late hour, he responded within minutes. After succinctly explaining the situation, I outlined my proposed initial steps. His reaction was immediate and unwavering in its support. Whatever assistance you require, he responded, we will navigate this together. They genuinely cannot access your shares without proper legal documentation. You would have been required to sign authorization. He was correct. Of course, my parents' 15% stake was legally theirs to transfer if they could somehow manage to execute the appropriate legal process, but they held no legitimate claim to my substantial majority stake. Nevertheless, their clear intention was deeply troubling, and I needed to safeguard both the company and myself. As dawn began to break, I felt an unusual sense of calm. The emotional pain persisted, but alongside it, a profound clarity grew within me, a clarity I had never experienced before. For the first time, I saw my relationship with my family for precisely what it was, not the mutually supportive system I had long pretended it to be, but a unilateral flow of financial resources and emotional labor. The critical question now was how to act upon this newfound clarity. My father telephoned precisely at 7:30 the following morning, his voice tense. Jennifer, there appears to be an issue with the house account. The mortgage payment was due yesterday, but the automatic payment failed to process. Naturally, his immediate concern was the interruption of financial contributions, not my abrupt departure from dinner, nor my evident distress. I have made some modifications to my financial arrangements, I explained calmly. The mortgage payment for this month is still covered, but going forward, you will be responsible for handling the payments yourselves. What exactly are you talking about? His voice escalated in pitch. We are unable to afford the mortgage on this property. You are fully aware of that. That is precisely why you purchased it for us. I did not purchase it for you, Dad, I corrected him. The house is legally titled in my name. I have been consistently making the payments. There is a significant difference. The ensuing silence on his end suggested this distinction had never occurred to him. What has gotten into you? Is this a reaction to last night? We genuinely believed you would be pleased that we were prioritizing Charlotte's future. The disconnect was so profound it nearly evoked laughter. I need to conclude this call, Dad. I have a scheduled meeting. Now, wait just a single minute. I ended the call, an action I had never previously undertaken. My phone immediately rang again, this time displaying my mother's number. I allowed it to go to voicemail. Her message was characterized by tears and accusations. Jennifer, how could you possibly do this to us after absolutely everything we have done for you? Your father is beside himself with distress. Contact us immediately. Everything they had done for me. The bitter irony was almost unbearable. I sent a concise text response. I am taking some time to reevaluate our financial arrangements. I will be in touch once I have had adequate time to think. Within the hour, I received multiple text messages from Charlotte, each one more frantic and accusatory than the last. Mom says you are completely cutting us off. What about the children's tuition? Are you genuinely doing this simply because Mom and Dad wish to assist me as well? I genuinely believed you were different. I thought you cared about family. A subsequent message quoted Peter, you are simply being manipulative and controlling with your financial resources. I silenced my phone and focused on preparing for the demands of the day ahead. This included an urgent meeting with our actual corporate attorney, Sarah Peterson, who was appropriately astonished when I recounted the details of what had transpired. They absolutely cannot transfer shares for which they lack proper legal documentation, she confirmed firmly. However, the fact that they even attempted this is deeply concerning. We must immediately review all company ownership documents and implement additional security measures. Before I could respond, my office phone rang. The receptionist sounded clearly uncomfortable. Your parents and your sister are here. They are being quite insistent about speaking with you immediately. Taking a deep, steadying breath, I instructed her to direct them to the conference room. Sarah, would you be willing to sit in on this meeting? I asked my attorney. That is precisely why I am here, she responded, gathering her notepad. The atmosphere in the conference room was palpably tense. My father's face was flushed with undisguised anger. My mother's eyes were red and swollen from crying, and Charlotte appeared on the verge of an emotional outburst. What is the meaning behind all of this? My father demanded the moment I entered the room. Cutting off the mortgage. Charlotte informs me that the tuition payment for the children was declined this morning as well. I believe we need to establish some very clear boundaries, I stated, taking a seat across from them. Sarah is our company attorney. She is present here to address any inquiries specifically regarding WebSphere. We do not require a lawyer, my mother interjected. This is a family matter. And that, precisely, is the fundamental problem, I replied evenly. There has been a detrimental blurring of the lines between family matters and business affairs that absolutely requires resolution. Charlotte forcefully slammed her hand down on the table. Just state it directly. You are punishing us because Mom and Dad wanted to assist me as well. No one is imposing punishment on anyone, I stated, deliberately maintaining my composure. I am simply in the process of separating my business assets from personal giving. You do not possess the right to demand shares of a company to which you have contributed absolutely nothing. My father's expression darkened considerably. We provided the initial investment in you from the very beginning. That 15% is legally ours to manage as we see fit. Yes, your 15% is indeed legally yours, I acknowledged. And if you genuinely desire to transfer it to Charlotte, that remains your choice. although there are specific legal channels for executing such a transfer. However, that is distinctly different from what you explicitly implied last night. What are you referring to? My mother asked, a look of genuine confusion appearing on her face. I looked directly at my father. You explicitly stated you were giving Charlotte my shares, not your shares. Mine. As if you possessed the inherent right to do so. He shifted uncomfortably in his seat. That was not my intended meaning. That was precisely your intended meaning, I countered firmly. And it forced me to confront a crucial realization. You perceive me solely as a resource, not as a person with intrinsic value. My worth within this family is measured exclusively by what I provide financially, nothing more. That simply is not true, my mother protested weakly. Isn't it? I retrieved a folder from my briefcase and deliberately placed it on the table before them. Here is a comprehensive list of every single financial contribution I have made to this family over the past 5 years. I began itemizing: house mortgage payments, $420,000. Vehicle payments, $37,000. Health insurance premiums, $65,000. Charlotte's children's tuition, $92,000. Peter's failed studio venture, $60,000. Family vacations I funded, $43,000. Regular cash gifts provided upon request, approximately $130,000. The cumulative total was staggering when presented so plainly, nearly $800,000 over a 5-year period, not including countless smaller expenses I hadn't meticulously documented. And what, precisely, have I received in exchange? I continued, my voice steady. Not genuine gratitude, not consistent respect, not even basic acknowledgement. Instead, I have received accusations of insufficient effort, claims of being selfish with my financial resources, and, ultimately, a blatant attempt to claim ownership of something I painstakingly built through years of dedicating 80-hour workweeks. Charlotte was the first to recover her composure. So, this is merely about financial considerations for you, proving how generous you have been. Holding it over our heads. No, I stated quietly. This is about acknowledging a painful and uncomfortable truth. Our relationship is not founded upon mutual care and respect. It has become purely transactional, and that transaction has consistently flowed in only one direction. My father's face had become increasingly red during my explanation. Now he abruptly stood up. We are not going to remain here and be subjected to a lecture from our own daughter. Either you resume providing assistance to this family, as you should, or the unfinished threat hung ominously in the air. Or what? I thought. They would cease loving me. That love already appeared conditional at best. I believe you should depart now, I stated calmly. When you are prepared to discuss fostering a healthy relationship that is not predicated solely on financial support, I will be available. After they had stormed out of the office, Sarah looked at me with a newfound expression of respect. That could not have been easy to do. It was not, I admitted, but it was undeniably necessary. Later that day, Ryan convened an emergency board meeting to address the potential shareholder issue. He had been my steadfast anchor throughout this crisis, his loyalty never wavering despite the turmoil my family had created. Your parents do not possess the capacity to directly interfere with the company's operations, he reassured the small board of directors. Jennifer's majority stake is legally secure, and we have already implemented additional protective measures. The subsequent few days were marked by escalating attempts at emotional manipulation from my family. My mother left tearful voicemails expressing distress over the potential loss of their home. Charlotte sent photographs of her children accompanied by captions such as wondering why Aunt Jennifer no longer loves them. My father's messages fluctuated between aggressive demands, sudden apologies, and renewed insistence. I consciously maintained my emotional distance, focusing instead on collaborating with Sarah to create clear legal and financial separation between my personal assets and any potential family entanglements. The situation took an unexpected and alarming turn when Peter appeared at the office, aggressively demanding to speak with me. Our receptionist, understandably alarmed by his behavior, immediately contacted security. You cannot conceal yourself behind your expensive lawyers, he shouted as security personnel escorted him from the building. We are fully aware of our rights. The phrase "their rights" echoed persistently in my mind long after he was gone. In their perception, having access to the fruits of my success was an inherent right, not a privilege or a gift freely given. That evening, Ryan, Sarah, and I met to formulate a comprehensive strategic response. "We need to safeguard both you personally and the company itself," Sarah explained. "Your parents' shares are legally theirs, but we can establish a new business entity structure that will effectively dilute the impact of that 15% stake." I have no desire to be vindictive, I emphasized. I simply require protection from any further attempts to seize what I have built through years of arduous effort. "It is not an act of vindictiveness to protect yourself," Ryan assured me. "It is an absolute necessity." The strategic plan we developed was multifaceted. First, we would establish a holding company that would legally own the intellectual property and all key assets of the business. Second, we would proactively communicate with our most important clients to ensure absolute continuity of service delivery, regardless of any potential internal shareholder disputes. And third, we would meticulously document all communications with my family in the event that legal action became unavoidable. Timothy Westfield, our initial major client who had evolved into something of a mentor figure over the years, was among the first I contacted. After explaining the situation in broad terms, he offered immediate and unwavering support. "Wherever you choose to go, we will follow, Jennifer," he stated without hesitation. "Our business relationship is with you personally, not merely the corporate structure." His extraordinary loyalty brought tears to my eyes, the kind of unwavering loyalty my own family had never demonstrated. Most of our other key clients expressed similar sentiments. They trusted me, they respected the business I had painstakingly built, and they indicated they would follow my leadership if necessary. Within a matter of days, we began witnessing the tangible consequences of my family's actions. Lacking my guidance, they had attempted to assert control over critical company decisions based solely on their minority stake. The board of directors easily blocked these efforts, but the internal disruption was undeniably taking a toll on day-to-day operations. By the end of the week, WebSphere's stock value had experienced a slight dip, the first minor downturn in our previously steady growth trajectory. Employees were quietly whispering about the family drama, their focus diverted from their work by the unusual tension permeating the office environment. I convened an all-hands meeting to address the situation directly and transparently. "There are some personal and structural changes currently taking place," I explained to the entire team, "but our core business foundation remains exceptionally strong. Our client relationships are secure, and our fundamental mission has not changed in any way." The transparency appeared to alleviate concerns, at least within the company itself, but the situation involving my family continued its downward spiral. A month after the fateful dinner, Charlotte attempted to assume a leadership role at WebSphere, apparently believing her 15% stake inherently granted her that authority. She arrived at the office unannounced, introducing herself to employees as a part owner and the new creative director. Ryan immediately contacted me. "Charlotte is here," he reported, his voice conveying bewilderment. "She's instructing the design team to change our brand colors. She insists purple represents abundance and wealth." Under different circumstances, the situation might have been comical. Charlotte, whose professional experience consisted of brief, unstable stints in retail and food service, attempting to direct seasoned designers and developers. But the disruption to the workplace was undeniably serious, and I drove directly to the office without delay. I discovered her in the main conference room, surrounded by clearly confused designers. "I am considering whether we require more inspirational quotes strategically placed on the website," she was saying. "People generally connect more effectively with wisdom." "Charlotte, we need to speak privately," I stated from the doorway. She turned, her expression a peculiar mixture of defiance and uncertainty. "I am currently in the midst of a crucial creative direction meeting." "No, you're not," I corrected her. "You do not work here." I kept my voice deliberately level but firm. "Please join me in my office immediately." The ensuing conversation was undoubtedly difficult, but absolutely necessary. I explained unequivocally that ownership shares did not confer operational authority, particularly minority shares that had not even been properly transferred yet. I outlined the serious legal ramifications of disrupting a business without proper authorization. And finally, I made it crystal clear that her presence at the office without a specific invitation would not be tolerated again. You simply cannot tolerate the possibility that I might possess something of my own, she accused, tears beginning to well in her eyes. You have always felt the compelling need to be the singularly successful one. The bitter irony of her statement was almost unbearable. Charlotte, I responded, my voice laced with weary patience, I have dedicated years of my life to assisting you in acquiring something of your own. I financed your wedding, your house renovations, Peter's studio equipment, your children's education expenses. I have never begrudged you anything until you made the calculated attempt to claim credit for something you did not build in any way. Mom and Dad explicitly stated that the shares would enable me to become a part of the company, she insisted stubbornly. Did they explain what actual shares entail? I asked. What significant responsibilities accompany ownership? What the precise legal implications are? Her blank expression served as the answer. My parents had dangled the prospect of ownership in my company without possessing any real understanding of it themselves, utilizing it as yet another manipulative tactic to extract financial resources for Charlotte, with complete disregard for my welfare or the business I had so diligently built. After Charlotte finally departed, Ryan suggested we accelerate the implementation of our protection plan. This situation is rapidly becoming unmanageable, he stated. We must legally secure the company immediately. He was undeniably correct. Within days, we had successfully established a new corporate structure that effectively shielded the company's core assets and operational functions. My parents' shares in the original entity remained legally intact, but they had been strategically diluted within the framework of the new structure. The reactions from my family were entirely predictable. My father telephoned, expressing outrage about corporate trickery. My mother tearfully pleaded that they were just trying to help Charlotte. Charlotte herself vacillated wildly between angry accusations and tearful attempts at superficial reconciliation, depending on which approach she believed might prove more effective in manipulating me. For the first time in my life, I held firm against the tidal wave of emotional manipulation. Each call, each text message, each demand only served to reinforce the undeniable correctness of my decision to establish and maintain these crucial boundaries. Thanksgiving arrived during this tumultuous period. Traditionally, I would have either hosted the family dinner at my home or joined them at their house, the house I had purchased for them. This year, I accepted Michael's invitation to join his family instead. The contrast was incredibly illuminating. Michael's parents inquired about my business ventures with genuine interest, not merely to calculate what financial contributions I might be able to provide. His siblings openly shared both their successes and their failures without any hint of judgment or competitive undertones. When I offered to assist in clearing the table after dinner, Michael's mother thanked me sincerely, rather than treating it as an expected service. Is family dynamic always like this for you? I asked Michael as we drove home that evening. Like what? He responded. Supportive? Genuinely interested in each other as individual people, not merely as financial resources. He glanced at me quickly before returning his gaze to the road. That is what family is supposed to be, Jennifer. Mutual support, not one-way extraction. Meanwhile, WebSphere was undeniably struggling under the direction of my parents and Charlotte. Without my leadership and guidance, they were making increasingly desperate and ill-conceived decisions. Clients were departing, talented employees were seeking opportunities elsewhere, and the company's value was rapidly depreciating. The 15% stake my parents had fought so intensely to control was worth less and less each passing month as the company's valuation plummeted. News eventually reached me that WebSphere was actively seeking a buyer, any buyer, in a desperate attempt to salvage what little remained before complete bankruptcy became the inevitable outcome. I felt no sense of satisfaction in this outcome, only a deep sadness for what the company could have become if unchecked greed and entitlement had not systematically destroyed something potentially valuable. The employees who had remained at WebSphere deserved a better fate than becoming casualties of my family's harmful actions. Through intermediaries, I discreetly helped facilitate a modest acquisition that successfully preserved those remaining jobs while effectively extracting the business from my family's detrimental control. They received some level of compensation for their shares, significantly less than the original peak value, but still something to show for the company's eventual sale. As for my own journey, I had discovered something far more profoundly valuable than mere financial success: the exhilarating freedom to define my own inherent worth, entirely separate from what I could provide to others. 1 year following the family dinner that irrevocably changed everything, Phoenix Digital Solutions reached a valuation of $12 million, a remarkable 50% higher than WebSphere's former peak valuation. Our team had expanded to 40 dedicated employees, all of whom were passionately committed to the positive company culture we had cultivated around innovation, mutual respect, and a healthy work-life balance. Webfair, in contrast, had been sold to a significantly larger technology conglomerate for a mere fraction of its previous worth. The employees had successfully transitioned to the acquiring company, but my family had received only a modest payout for their shares, sufficient to maintain their existing lifestyle for a temporary period, but nowhere near the significant windfall they had clearly anticipated when attempting their takeover. I decided it was time for a different kind of meeting with my parents. I suggested coffee at a neutral location, a cafe situated downtown, neither their home nor my office. To my surprise, they agreed quite readily, perhaps harboring a quiet hope for a reconciliation that might somehow restore their prior financial comfort. Charlotte was conspicuously absent, having declined my invitation with a curt message: "Nothing to discuss unless you are finally prepared to help the family again." My parents arrived looking noticeably older than I had remembered. My father's typically confident posture seemed diminished, and my mother's usual nervous energy appeared more pronounced than before. We exchanged awkward, brief greetings before settling at a quiet corner table with our coffees. "You appear to be doing well," my mother offered tentatively. "The new company must be performing successfully." "Phoenix is indeed thriving," I confirmed. "We recently expanded our operations to include clients in Europe." "That is commendable," my father said, clearly uncomfortable with casual conversation when the larger, unresolved issues loomed palpably between us. "Look, Jennifer, regarding everything that occurred." He paused, allowing him the space to continue. This was his crucial opportunity to acknowledge the significant harm that had been inflicted, to assume responsibility for the profound betrayal that had fractured our family dynamic. "We may have acted somewhat impulsively," he finally conceded, focusing intently on his coffee cup rather than meeting my eyes. "The situation concerning the shares became somewhat unmanageable. We wish we could simply return to how things were previously." Not an apology. Not even a basic acknowledgement of the fundamental underlying problem. Merely a passive wish to revert to the former arrangement where I was the constant provider and they were the recipients. "Things cannot simply revert to how they were before," I stated gently but firmly. That particular relationship dynamic was unhealthy for every one of us involved. "So, you are simply abandoning your family?" My mother's words carried the familiar, sharp sting of guilt manipulation. "After absolutely everything we did for you during your formative years." I took a deep, steadying breath, grounding myself before responding. "I am not abandoning anyone," I clarified. "I am establishing necessary boundaries that should have been firmly in place a very long time ago." There is a fundamental distinction between providing loving support for family members and actively enabling harmful, entitled patterns of behavior. "We simply wanted to assist Charlotte," my father insisted stubbornly. "She requires a greater level of assistance than you do." That observation may well be accurate, I acknowledged. But deliberately taking from me without even requesting permission, particularly something I dedicated years of sacrifice to build, was not truly assisting Charlotte. It was causing irreparable harm to our relationship and, perhaps more significantly, teaching her that a sense of entitlement is an acceptable path forward. We engaged in conversation for nearly 2 hours, exploring ground we had never previously dared to tread. I explained, with quiet conviction, how their actions had instilled within me the painful perception of being valued exclusively for what I could financially provide, rather than for the person I was inherently. They offered justifications and rationalizations rather than genuine understanding, but at the very least, we were finally engaging in the conversation that had been desperately needed for years. I want you to be aware that, despite everything that has transpired, I arranged for you both to receive a portion of the WebSphere sale proceeds. I informed them as our meeting drew to a close. It has been deposited into your account. Not because I believe I owe it to you in any way, but because I have consciously chosen to share it with you. The deliberate distinction was crucial. A gift freely given, not an obligation begrudgingly fulfilled. Their expressions of surprise suggested they had not anticipated receiving even this much after the events that had unfolded. My relationship with Michael deepened considerably throughout this intensely challenging year. He had witnessed my arduous struggle to establish crucial boundaries without allowing bitterness to consume me, to protect myself and my creation without resorting to punishing others. When he proposed to me 6 months after the WebSphere sale was finalized, I accepted without the slightest hesitation that would have inevitably plagued me before. Your family is, of course, invited to the wedding, he stated as we discussed our plans. But only if their presence will genuinely contribute to your happiness, not diminish it in any way. The profound consideration embedded within his words brought tears to my eyes. For the very first time in my life, another person was genuinely prioritizing my emotional well-being without expecting anything whatsoever in return. My journey towards personal healing involved multiple synergistic approaches. Weekly therapy sessions helped me identify and confront the deeply ingrained beliefs about my self-worth being inextricably linked to my capacity for provision and self-sacrifice, patterns that had defined my existence for decades. Meditation and yoga provided me with practical tools to manage the anxiety that often arose when interactions with my family inevitably triggered old, deeply entrenched patterns. Perhaps most importantly, I actively cultivated a supportive community of friends and professional colleagues who consistently demonstrated what healthy, reciprocal relationships truly resembled. I discovered an unexpected sense of purpose in mentoring other female entrepreneurs, particularly those navigating similar challenges involving family expectations while striving to build their own businesses. Their stories frequently mirrored aspects of my own experiences, and sharing my journey enabled them to establish healthier boundaries proactively from the outset. You possess the ability to genuinely love your family without sacrificing your own inherent well-being, I would tell them. In fact, establishing healthy, clear boundaries often leads to significantly healthier, more authentic relationships in the long term. 6 weeks prior to my wedding day, I extended an invitation to my entire family for dinner, my parents, Charlotte, Peter, and their children. The event was, in a sense, a test, an opportunity to ascertain whether our newly established boundaries could genuinely support a modified form of relationship. To my genuine surprise, Charlotte arrived without Peter, her demeanor noticeably more subdued than I remembered it. He is no longer actively in the picture, she explained briefly when I inquired about his absence. The children seemed genuinely pleased to see me, although they had visibly grown considerably in the intervening months since our last encounter. Dinner proceeded with a strange, new dynamic. My parents were conspicuously careful with their words, meticulously avoiding any direct requests for financial assistance. Charlotte mentioned that she was actively searching for employment, something she hadn't done in years. When the check arrived, no one instinctively assumed that I would cover it. A small, yet incredibly significant, shift. I am in the process of obtaining my teaching certificate, Charlotte stated as dessert was served. The local community college offers a program that conveniently accommodates the children's schedules. That is truly wonderful news, I replied, genuinely pleased by this positive development. Teaching would undoubtedly suit you very well. A flicker of something, perhaps pride or maybe a quiet determination, crossed her face. I recognized the necessity of being able to support myself, she admitted softly. Recent events have certainly made that abundantly clear. It was neither a full apology nor a complete acknowledgement of her specific role in the events that had transpired, but it undeniably represented movement in a healthier, more self-reliant direction. I consciously chose to acknowledge the positive step rather than dwelling on past injuries or grievances. The gathering concluded without drama or the infliction of new emotional wounds, a modest success, particularly when measured against the backdrop of our family's complex history. As they prepared to depart, my father awkwardly mentioned my upcoming wedding. "We received the invitation," he stated, his tone hesitant. "We would like very much to attend, if that is still acceptable." "I would genuinely like that," I replied simply. In the car on the drive home afterward, Michael inquired about how I felt about the evening. "Hopeful," I responded after a moment of thoughtful consideration. "Not necessarily for the attainment of a perfect relationship or complete mutual understanding, but for the possibility of something significantly healthier than what we possessed before." They are making an effort, in their own limited capacity. Building Phoenix had undoubtedly provided me with invaluable knowledge regarding business strategy and effective leadership. But the process of rebuilding my own fractured sense of self-worth ultimately proved to be the far more crucial and transformative education. I learned, unequivocally, that genuine love should never arrive accompanied by itemized invoices, that the act of helping others is beautiful and fulfilling when it is a freely chosen gesture, but becomes toxic and damaging when it is a relentless demand. That true family connection is founded upon mutual support and reciprocal care, not upon unilateral extraction. Most importantly, I discovered the profound and liberating truth that my intrinsic value exists entirely independently of what I possess the capacity to provide to others, a truth so self-evident to some, yet absolutely revolutionary for individuals like myself who were raised to assume the role of relentless caretakers at our own personal expense. Today, Phoenix continues its impressive growth trajectory. My marriage to Michael brings daily joy, stability, and reciprocal support. And my family relationships now exist within carefully defined boundaries that serve to protect the emotional well-being of everyone involved. The journey to reach this point was undeniably arduous and fraught with pain, but the destination, the freedom to live authentically and define my own worth, has proven to be unequivocally worth every single difficult step. If you have ever found yourself in a similar situation, giving of yourself until absolutely nothing remains, please remember this crucial truth. Establishing necessary boundaries is not an act of selfishness. It is an absolute requirement for the possibility of genuine, authentic relationships. True love inherently supports and nurtures your wholeness. It does not merely seek to consume your resources.